All right. We are going to. I'm going to be sharing a few thoughts here, and hopefully, I won't be too long. If it will be too long, then I may make this into a part two if it becomes necessary. Um, Today, my topic actually comes to us in the form of a question, and the question is simply this: do you have Jesus or religion? I want you to think about the question: do you have Jesus or religion? I guess because we're all Christians. If the question should be asked to you directly, you know what you'll say. We'll all say we have Jesus. Isn't that right? We'll all say we have Jesus. But I'll tell you something. In my growing up years, um, there were some statements that were constantly hurled at us and about what was coming and what was coming to us and what will be happening to the world and all of this, right? In fact, here's one of the more famous ones that as I remember, it is this: there's a storm coming, relentless in its fury. Are you prepared to meet it? Now, if you grew up like I grew up, I'm sure you're familiar with statements like those, right? But I have a question. Is that statement true? Is that statement true? Is there a storm coming? When you examine the prophecies of Jesus, and you know that includes what he had to say in the New Testament, and that also includes what he had to say in Daniel and the Revelation. When you look at the prophecies of Jesus regarding the last days, the day of the Lord, the setting up of the image of the beast, the system of control that will govern all life on earth and usher in the end of the world. When you look at all of this, is there a storm on the forecast? I want you to think about that. Is there a storm on the forecast? And I want to be sure that we are talking about the same thing. So I'm going to actually look at the definition of storm. Among other things, one of the definition of a storm is this. Listen carefully. A storm is an atmospheric disturbance manifested in strong winds, accompanied by rain, snow, or other precipitations, and often by thunder and lightning. All right. So that's a fairly good definition of what a storm is. Notice what it says, that a storm is a disturbance, an atmospheric disturbance. Okay. So just think about this: that a disturbance to a normal way of life, can that be called a storm? I think it can be called a storm. Would you agree? In fact, let's look at let's look at two verses. Okay, let's look at two verses from Luke 21, and Luke 21 really is just one of those chapters that predicts the end. It predicts the end and what will happen as the end of all things approaches. So let's go to Luke. What did I say? Luke 21. And look at me at two verses here, starting in verse 25. Luke 21, starting in verse 25. Look at what it says. And there shall be, Jesus speaking, and he's speaking about the end of the world. He's speaking about the signs of the end, what the signs of his coming, and the sign of the end of the world. Look at what he says here. And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity. The sea and the waves.
Audio, audio.
Your audio's gone, Howard.
Can you hear me now?
You said the sea and the waves, and then you went out. Yes, we hear you now.
Okay. Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, you're very good now.
Okay, okay, all right. So I didn't finish the verse. Sorry, you didn't hear the finish of it. So the verse says, and upon earth, see, it said there shall be sign in the sun and in the moon and the stars. But he says, upon earth there shall be the distress of nations, and he says this distress will be with perplexity. And I want you to understand that because it's not just distress of nations; it's distress of nations with perplexity. What does that mean? Because when you look at this, what you're seeing is that with the distress that comes, the perplexity is that it can't be fixed. So the people are perplexed when they look at this distress of nations because they cannot fix the problem. And then to add to that, to compound that, he says there will also be the sea and the waves roaring as well. Look at what he says in verse 26, the next verse. Men's hearts failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming upon the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. The perspective I want you to see, and in fact, what I want you to understand is what Jesus prophesied would be, what it would be like when the world is coming to its close. Okay, when we are in that time of the day of the Lord, we're in that time when the signs around us are showing that it is the end. And so clearly the storm will be so furious, because that's what he's saying. He's trying to show you what it's like. And he says, this storm will be so furious. Look at what he says, that men's hearts will be failing them. They'll become afraid. And especially when they're looking upon the things that are coming upon the earth. Now, I'm here to say this, that when the storm hits, our response to the storm will reveal whether we have Jesus or we have religion, right? Our response to the storm. When the storm hits, we will have either one of two things. We will have fear or we will have faith. And this will be, I guess, again, the question really is pertinent. Do you have Jesus or religion? What is it that you really have? And I think it is necessary, and as you'll see as we go on, it is necessary for us to examine ourselves, to examine our experience, to examine, to be sure. I mean, Brother Don used that verse there in Paul in 2 Corinthians 13, where it says, examine yourself to see whether or not you're in the faith. And he talks about knowing and being assured of this, because he says, otherwise, if you're not in this reality, and I believe it's necessary for us to know now, at this moment, here and now, it is necessary for you to know. Do you only have Jesus or religion? Do you have Jesus only, or do you have religion only? And let me just hasten on to say, having Jesus is not religion. Having Jesus is a reality. All right, I want us to examine a story, a real story, and in the Word, and then I have a few questions afterward. So let's go to Mark. Let's go to the book of Mark and see what it says there. I'm getting a signal that's saying my connection is not so good. So if something goes, I'd like for you to just just let me know. Did I say Mark? Mark chapter 4. And we're going to pick up the story starting in verse 35. Verse 35. So read along with me, please. And the same day when even was come, he said unto them, let us pass over unto the other side. This is Jesus speaking to his disciples. And when they had sent away the multitude, they took him even as he was in the ship. And there were also with him other little ships. And there arose, it says in verse 37, and there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship so that it was now full. And he was in the hinder part of the ship, verse 38 says, asleep on a pillow. And they awake him and say unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And he arose, verse 39, and rebuked the wind, and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And he said, verse 40, and he said unto them, Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? And they feared exceedingly, and said one to another, What manner of man is this, that even the wind and sea obey him? Now that's a familiar story, I'm sure that we're familiar with this story of Jesus in the storm. But I have a question for you. And the first question I'd like to ask is this: did the disciples have Jesus? Did the disciples have Jesus? All right, I'm sure you'll agree that they did. He was in the boat with them. Jesus was there with them. He was there among them. His presence was clearly felt and clearly seen because he was physically there. All right, so he was there in the boat. Now, let me ask you another question. And in fact, the other question comes from the other question comes from the other narrative, which is Luke, I think Luke 8. Let's go. I'm going to just look at Luke 8 and see what it says here in verse 23. Look at what it says here in verse 23 of Luke 8. But as they sailed, it's the same story. But as they sailed, he fell asleep, and there came down a storm of wind on the lake, and they were filled with water and were in jeopardy. I want you to think about what the verse says. They were filled with water and they were in jeopardy. I have a question, and the question is relating to this. Why did they wait? Why did they wait until the boat was full of water? And why did they wait until they were in jeopardy of dying, of drowning, and of losing their lives? Why did they wait? That's my question. Now, and I want you to think as you think about the question, that they were doing, this is the perspective I have. They were doing what is human to do. And what is that? Try to help yourself by all means first. Then, if that doesn't work, then you resort to outside help if you don't make it, right? That is kind of the human thing. That's what we do all the time. Isn't that the human way of life? Let me ask you, isn't it true that only when it becomes overwhelming that we actually call out for help? The human way is to try to do and to fix. And when it gets worse and when it gets bad, then we know what we say then. We say, Lord, only you can help now. But it's normally when we're at the end of our road, when we're at the end of our help, when we're at the end, when all our alternatives fail, that we actually turn and we say, Lord, only you, only you. Now, I want you to consider a question. In fact, I think the most important question of all is what Jesus had to say here in Mark's version of the story. And in verse 40, I want you to think about this question because I believe it's important to understand and to get the lessons from what Jesus is here saying. Now, here's the question. Why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? All right. My question then is, how did Jesus know that they had no faith? How did Jesus know that these disciples had no faith? You know, it's easy to tell. He knew because of the demonstration. What was the demonstration? That they were fearful and fearing for their lives, thinking that they were going to die. And they say, "Don't you care that we are perishing?" Just listen to what they said, and it was clear that they were afraid. It was clear that they were fearful. And what's the truth? You can't be in fear and faith at the same time. But it's the crisis. Here's my point. It's the crisis that demonstrates this. It's the crisis that pulls out of you, pulls out of them what is actually in them. And what was in them? Fear. Fear that was in them. And notice what happened though. I do believe that they tried their best to do. They're fishermen. These guys lived on the sea. These guys, I mean, this was something that they were used to every day. And so they were, look, you don't have to trouble the master. We don't have to call Jesus for this. We can deal with this ourselves, right? Until they recognize, no, this is not normal. This is beyond us. Then they went for Jesus. So here's my point. It is the crisis that will prove your reality. It is the storm. See, that's what the storm does. The storm comes to show us whether or not we have Jesus or we have religion. That's the purpose of the storm. The storm comes so that we will know our reality. So for sure, trouble is coming. For sure, persecution is coming. Do I know? Do you know how I know? Because Jesus said so. For sure, sorrows and heartaches and death is coming. We know that. But do you know why they're coming? The reason is that they're coming, and it's going to be a means of proving. Now, last week we talked about the kingdom of God on earth is left up to you and me to demonstrate this kingdom. It is to demonstrate to the world, you and me, our lives is to demonstrate to the world the reality of what we have, the reality of what is in us, the reality of whether or not Jesus' kingdom is fit to last forever, is fit to rule the universe forever. That's it. So when these storm comes, when these trouble comes, when persecution comes, when all of this comes, it is to prove to you and to me and to the world whether or not all that we have is just talk, which is just religion, or we have a reality in us that stands when the storm comes and faces the storm because we have Jesus. That's the difference, right? So, brothers and sisters, let me tell you something. We have to be real. We have to be real in dealing with ourselves. Because when the storm breaks, when we are in that crisis, we are going to be tested and proven to see whether or not we are I'm losing that word. We are credible witnesses. That's the word. This is to prove to us whether or not we are credible witnesses of the kingdom. We are credible witnesses of God. We are credible witnesses of who He has made us to be in Jesus Christ. Now, most times we think that when something happens, listen, when something happens, guess what we do? We begin to call around and we reach out to others to pray. And we think by doing that is faith. But you know that if we're honest, if we're really honest, totally honest, most times that is really a fear tactic, right? Because the truth is, one with God is the majority. That's the truth. Move that mountain. That's it.
Audio is gone again.
No, nothing. Yeah, nothing, Howard. Nothing.
I lost everything last time, the picture and the audio. What's going on?
Still nothing. Still nothing.
Nothing there. I hear you good, Brother David, but I don't hear Howard at all.
Yeah, I don't usually have the problems. Your light is green. Your mic signal is green, but there's no audio. So I don't know if you need to maybe restart.
Exit and come back.
Yeah, that'll do it. Let me restart.
Not you, Brother Sam, Brother Howard we're talking to.
Just cancel it out. Pray over it and cancel it out.
Restart.
Still
Turn
nothing.
the computer off and turn it back on again. Can we text or anything, maybe? I'm gonna turn this computer off and turn it back on.
Okay, alternatively, you could maybe join with your phone or something.
I can't even text him.
Speak through the phone.
I can't get my text thing to work. Wait a minute.
All right, he says he's changing his system, so
Okay. Where am I texting? Hey, Aeon, you have my son today? Where you left him? Did you
We talk about that.
know I'm talking about. You told me you gonna have my son today. You told me that last
We
week.
talk about that later.
My son, turn your eyes upon Jesus. Do you have it? No.
Always.
And you could sing a song meanwhile till Howard gets back on, eh?
Are you gonna play this song for us later?
All right, I think Howard has changed his system. Yeah, just unmute Howard. You're muted there.
All right, let me know if you're hearing me. If it's
Yeah,
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Let me give you presenter, and
is
then
it
you should.
negative?
Amen.
Amen. Get the egg back.
David, you said negative.
Oh, we're hearing you. We're hearing you, Howard.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, okay, all right, okay. That's an interesting one. Never had that issue before. But I guess there's always a first. Now, the other question is, where was I?
There was a storm coming.
All right, so I think I was okay. I was talking about what happens sometimes when we're in a situation, we're in a bind. You know, when you're in a bind, it's easy for you to call to say, you know what, this is happening. Please pray for me. Please pray for me. And we make, you know, we what we say, we make a chain of prayers, right? And we saying, if with this chain of prayer, we must get an answer. And as I was saying, sometimes that's not faith. For most times, that's not faith. It's a kind of a fear strategy, because the perspective I want us to have is that we have been given that reality. Each one of us have been given that reality. I'm going to give you a story. I'm not sure that I'm supposed to tell this story, but I'll just share a little bit of it. You know, my wife's mom died a couple of weeks ago, and she's just been very, very, very you know, sad and grieving. And I think she did have quite a good relationship with her mom. I mean, like for example, like we went to shop yesterday, and she picked up a cabbage, a head of cabbage, and the moment she picks up this head of cabbage, she remembers her mom because she normally shops for her, right? And her mom loves cabbage, so I don't think that she's kind of trying to sit down and stay in sadness and grieve and all of. No, I don't think so. I just think that naturally, as we go on, just these different things kind of reaches her in a certain way and causes sadness, causes her to reflect, you know. But what I find is that the grieving actually, I'm getting that side again. The grieving actually leads now to her having some physical problems, like issues in her body, right? That is and tell me if you lose the audio, just let me know, because I'm getting this sign that says I'm having some issues with the network. Anyway, so and I mean some reactions to what is happening in our body is clearly problematic. Okay, now what do we do? Do we stand our ground in seeking the Lord, or do I start a prayer chain and or something, and I write and I said, look, brethren, you all need to pray for my wife because she's not doing well. I don't know what is going on. So what do you do? I'm just saying that these crises that hits us really is to prove us. When the crisis comes, is to prove what we have and what is inside of us. Is it just the mouth that we talk and we talk? But when you're in a crisis, you say, you know what? Let's go see a specialist. Let's go see a doctor. Let's go here. And don't we go to God, or do we go to the doctor? And the doctor says, well, there's nothing we can do. I think she's having some major issues that we can't help. And then we come home now and we say, okay, Lord, only you know, because I know this is how humanity is. This is the perspective. And that, so I'm saying, to add to that, did I say too much? I'm sorry. Anyway, to add to that, I'm just saying we have to stand on that premise of knowing who we are, knowing our reality. Now, maybe in the future we'll talk a little bit more about identity, right? Who we have been made to be, and standing in that place. Because you know, for example, and have you ever been somewhere and you hear somebody, or maybe even a conversation, and somebody say, look, Do you know who you're talking to? Do you know who I am? When such things happen, you're actually dealing with somebody who is in authority. Normally, it's a person in a position of authority, but that person knows its authority and he speaks with authority. Now, do we speak in that way? Do we deal with the situations around us in the same way, in that kind of an authority? Or do we, like beggars, ask, please, beg you, please, Lord, please, not this time, please help me. You know, God, I can't. I mean, is that our position? And it probably is. Look, and if that is, I'm not trying to mock you, and I'm just saying it's probably where you are. But I'm just saying He has done for us far more than that. He has given us authority, not that we ask Him to do, but He said, look what He says: speak to the mountain. He didn't say speak to God about the mountain. He says speak to the mountain and it shall obey you. So whatever comes, when that mountain stands before you, you say, move. That's it. That's the authority that you have. Now, and that doesn't come from just me speaking it, right? That doesn't just come from you listening to me saying it and then trying to do it. That's not the perspective. The perspective is knowing your reality. And I think this is really what he tried to bring out in a few parables. And maybe I just do that and close. Let me see. Right. I think Jesus clearly demonstrates this, that even in the kingdom of God, there will always be those who have Jesus and those who have religion. For example, in the parable of the wheat and the tares, they will grow till a certain point. Do you remember? They will grow together until a certain point. And at that point, when they reach that point, the tares will be revealed and the wheat will be seen to be wheat. I think somebody's microphone is on. Can you just mute everybody for me, Brother David? Okay. All right. So I'm just saying in that parable that is kind of the situation that when that point comes. But I have a question really. Do you really want to wait until that time to be proven? Do you want to wait until a crisis comes to be proven? I don't want to wait. No, sir. I want to know beforehand who I am. So there needs to be an adjustment in my life. I will have ample time to do that. In fact, on Sunday, during the fasting, we talked a little bit about the story of the virgin, and maybe I'll just mention a couple of things here. That Jesus said of them. Look at what he said. He starts the story and then he says that there were 10 virgins. And look at what he says. He says 5 of them were wise and 5 of them were foolish. Now let me ask you a question. How did he prove who were wise and who among them were foolish? How did he prove that? In fact, let's did I didn't lose that. Let's look at Matthew 25. How did he prove those who were wise and those who were foolish? It's an interesting perspective. But look at what it says here well, let's start in verse 2. And 5 of them were wise and 5 of them were foolish. He said that they, look at this now, they that were foolish took their lamps and took no oil with them. And look at what he says about the wise. But the wise took oil in their vessels with their lamps. I want you to think about that. So he says they are proven by their experience. They are proven. Look, all of them, all the virgins all had the word of God. All the virgins all had the Bible with them. All the virgins, they all knew their scripture. And they all had the experience of religion. Look, think about that. But there were 5 virgins who had more than religion. They had Jesus. I mean, I could safely say that the 5 wise and the 5 foolish virgins is just an indication of those who had religion versus those who had Jesus. Right? They were all invited to the wedding. They were all waiting for the bridegroom to show up. But the bridegroom tarried. I want you to keep that in mind. The bridegroom tarried, and they all slumbered and slept. You know the story. Now, did the sleep change their state? Did their slumbering and sleeping change them from who they were? Did the sleeping cause them to lose Jesus? I don't think so. I think whatever they look, you've probably heard this. What you are, you're becoming. So the reality is they fell asleep as foolish virgins, and they woke up as foolish virgins. Jesus told you why they were foolish. They were not foolish because they fell asleep. They were foolish because they had no experience with God. They were foolish because all they had was the word of God. They knew the scriptures well, but they had no experience with God. That's what the oil represents. The sleep tried their faith. The sleep prove the kind of quality that they were in. That's slumbering. In fact, remember, think about this. The sleep and the tarrying of the Lord are linked together. It is because he tarried why they slept. So don't forget that. It's because he tarried why they had well, in fact, let me share something else with you that I just thought about. The word which they all had, the word, the religion that they had, the doctrines that they understood, the teachings that they understood, did not lead the foolish virgins to grow up into the fullness of the measure of the stature of Christ. It did not. Now, what was this slumber? And you might agree with me, and you may disagree, and that's all right. But I believe the slumbering has to do with what they did when Jesus tarried. What they did when Jesus tarried was that they lost focus because it took too long to come. They lost focus and they began, if I should use a term, they began to occupy until he comes, but they began to occupy in the wrong way. In fact, look at what it says here in Luke. Let me go back to Luke. Look at what it says here in Luke 21. Very interesting what Jesus says here in verse 34 and 35. Look at what he says here. And he said unto them, look at what he said. He said unto them, let me share that. He said unto them, take heed to yourselves, and take heed to yourself, lest at any time your heart become overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and the cares of this life, so that day comes upon you unawares. Here's the point I'm making. I believe this has to do with the slumbering and sleeping. This surfeiting and drunkenness and the cares of this life is as a result of the fact that he tarried. Because he tarried, this surfeiting and drunkenness and cares of life come upon them, and they were more concerned about life, the cares of life. They were more concerned about the things of life than they were concerned about the things of God or their experience with God. So he says here, for as a snare, in verse 35, shall it come upon all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. So this is the perspective that I want you to see. And it's the perspective that because Christ started, because there's this long, I mean, didn't Peter say, since the fathers fell asleep, all things continued as they were? The reason why is, and I mean, it's in the same breath that he was saying that scoffers shall go about and say, where's the promise of him that is to come? It is an indication that there's a delay. It's an indication that Christ tarried. And for this reason, the people of God, I believe the slumbering and sleeping has to do with the fact that they got involved with other things. In fact, I like the term other things because I'm thinking about the parable of the sower. And in the parable of the sower, Jesus talked about, in fact, I believe in the parable of the sower, if you think about it carefully, you had the wayside, you had the stony ground, you had the thorns, and you had the good ground. But I believe that where the thorns were was also good ground. Where the thorns were good ground because those thorns were thriving. And so I believe that the place. No audio? No audio?
You're fine. I think Justin has his mic open.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I was about to say this thing. This is a sign. Anyway, so I'm saying that the perspective. Here's the perspective. The perspective of the thorns. In fact, let me just look at that verse quickly. And I should be wrapping up now anyway. Mark. Let's go back to the book of Mark. Mark chapter 4. Mark 4 is really where we got the parable of the one of the places. Matthew 13 is another place. But let's look at what he says here about and these, verse 18, and these are they which were sown among thorns, such as hear the word. Listen to this carefully now. They hear the word, they know the word, they have religion. Look at this. And the cares of this world, and the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things creeping in choke the word, and it becometh unfruitful. I want you to consider. I believe that even this parable, with this this perspective of the seeds that fell among thorns, is an indication of what happens when the master delayed is coming. When the master delayed is coming, this is an indication of what the slumbering and sleeping has to do. Because remember, they all slumbered and slept. They lost focus on the urgency of the times. Maybe they became involved with other things, according to what the verse says. But here is where I believe the major difference with both groups lie. Here's where I believe the major difference is. It's that one group never lost sight of their reality. Regardless of what they were involved in, they never lost sight of who they were and what they had. They never lost sight of the fact that they had Jesus with them and in them. They had a connection with Jesus that even during this time of involvement in other things, they knew their experience. While I believe the other group was fully involved without the connection to Jesus, but they were religious. They were religious. They had religious experiences. They knew the word of God and all of this, right? But it was not enough. So something happened. Something happened at the darkest moment in history, where the word says at midnight, right? A call came. A call came from the signs of the time. A call came from the fulfillment of prophecies, probably. A call came. The storm is about to break. The storm is on the horizon, and it is moving with lightning speed. And everybody awakes from business, and everybody awakes from worldly involvement, and everybody is ready now to test their relationship with God. But this is the moment of revelation. This is the moment now that you're going to know really and truly who you are on the inside. Who you are. Is it just your religion that you've been spouting, your doctrine that you've been, or do you really have the connection with God? See, the end of all things have arrived. Jesus is about to come. Probation is closing. Do you have Jesus? That's the question. Do you have Jesus? And I believe these are the ones who will go into the wedding. Those who have Jesus. Those who have the oil of the Spirit. Those who just don't have religion. They have an experience with Jesus. These are the ones that will be saved. Now, here's a sad reality. Brothers and sisters, let me tell you something. Do you realize that if you have religion and wait for the call of the bridegroom's coming to get up, it is too late? Do you realize that? Do you realize that if what you have is religion and you're waiting for this call when you're sure, look, Jesus is coming, and you see everything, that is too late for you to actually be ready? And it's a sad reality, but it's the truth. And I want you to let that soak in, family. My family, I want you to understand this, that is what I'm telling you. If you wait for that time to wake up, you are lost forever. There's no hope for you if you're going to wait on that time, to awake to who you really are, to awake to examination, to be sure about your experience. If you're waiting on that time, look, forget it. So I say to you, brothers and sisters, I say to my friends, I say to my enemies, wake me up. Wake me up. Look, let me ask you something. Would you prefer to wake up a week before everything is ready, and to know that you're ready and to go in with the bridegroom? Would you prefer to wake up a month before? What about a year before? Wouldn't it be better for you to wake up a year before, 2 years, 3 years before, than to wait until that moment and the sad reality hits you that the bridegroom comes, and only because you were not ready, you were not able to go in with the bridegroom? I mean, I'm just saying, brothers and sisters, this is the wake-up call. This is the wake-up call. I'm saying, I'm waking you up, and I hope that you'll wake me up. And what do I mean by this? That is the wake-up call. I mean that we should get up now before the call hits. I mean, for some people, I know, it just seems to be human nature. People prefers to wait until the last moment. I mean, I've seen that happen so often that people, I mean, I would like to call those people, you know, I know, because I know many people who are like this. They're the last moment procrastinators, if that's a term I can use. They're the last moment procrastinators. They are like Lot's wife. You know what they do? They linger behind, and even though the angel said, look, hurry up, and even though Lot is ahead with his 3 daughters, she's hanging behind, and she's hanging behind. And when the sulfur when the sulfur is poured out upon Sodom, she was covered with the salt because she was at the back. So I know people like that. They're always at the back. They're the last one to make decisions. They're the last one to make a move. And they're waiting on everybody to move first, and then they will come afterwards. But this is a warning for you. If you're in that place, in that category, this is a warning to you. It's a warning for you. Shake up your fallow grounds, because you're in danger of losing your soul and being lost forever. You have an opinion? Here you go. Right. So anyway, I just want to in fact, let me just give the final thought here in closing. I have preached many sermons on spiritual warfare. This is a reality, whether or not we accept it to be so. Right? We are in a spiritual warfare. I'm looking at different things that are happening to different people and all of this, and I realize it's a spiritual warfare, and we can only, in the spirit, in having Jesus, we can only in this realm fight. We can only in this realm fight. And the fight is to fight that good fight of faith, to lay hold on your reality that you have, and in that reality speak against everything else that comes. We look, I have looked with you together, and you know this. We have looked at the whole armor of God. You know, we have talked about it, right? But let me ask you a question. There's an important observation that I have had over time, and I'll put it to you in the form of a question. As we talk about the armor of God, do you know the armor of God? Do you know the armor of God? I mean, the helmet, the breastplate, the shield, the sword, the belt, and the shoe. You know the armor of God? Or are you wearing the armor of God every moment of every day? Do you wear the armor of God, or are you just aware? Do you just know the armor? You understand my point? Because I know people, look, I know people who leave their weapons at home or leave their weapons in their vehicles, and so when they meet upon an altercation, they would go for them at that time, they'd go for their weapons. But many times this proves to be futile. Because what you need is, when you're in warfare, because this is the truth, when you're in warfare, you have to always be ready, because you're always at war. We're soldiers and we're at war. So are we clad in the armor of God? Or are we saying, look, I have my armor put down at home, and if you keep going, I'll go home and put on my armor and come back? Is that the perspective? Or is it that you are ready wherever you are? Is it that you are ready, that your loins is girt about with the truth of who you are and who you have been made to be, and who lives inside of you, and that is greater than anything, any other force in the world? Or is it that you know the reality that you are righteous, you have his righteousness, and that breastplate covers all your vital organs? Do you actually know that you have the sword of the Spirit? Do you know that you have the shield of faith? Do you know that you have that helmet of sun? I mean, do you know that you know that you know that this is who you are, perfectly clad, and nothing can touch you, and whatever storm is coming, you will bring it on, because it's not me that's ready, I'm dead. Jesus is always ready. Do you know why? Because Jesus is in me. I have him, he has me, and I need not worry, because I never lift a finger except he does it in me, and he does it through me. So I'm just saying, look, brothers and sisters, the question still lies here. Do you have Jesus? Do you know beyond the shadow of a doubt that you have me? Because I'm telling you, the storm is going to be proving whether or not you're truthful or you're a liar, right? So let's not wait on the storm. In fact, I'm thinking about the beautiful, there's this beautiful song that that says clearly, no storm can shake my inmost calm. That's amazing, right? No storm can shake my inmost calm, if to that rock I'm clinging.